staying here. Right. I looked at two groups of drummers. Drummers over the age of 30 whom I cunningly called adults, and teenage drummers, so I term teenagers, and they were all in London or very close. So I don't want to talk too much about what I did with them, but I interviewed them and I did a couple of quantitative surveys as well. But back to my learning and identity thing, I was looking at the drummers to figure out how they learn. And I looked at formal learning, which various people have talked about, and which was very interesting. And informal learning, we've heard an awful lot about that over the last couple of days, and neither of these things seemed quite to describe what I was seeing. There was a lot of formal learning, there was a lot of informal learning. There was a lot of informalizing the formal. I had some ideas about this, such as tuition DVDs and lessons on YouTube. Formal lessons that people have uploaded to YouTube that you can then watch and learn from, so you're learning informally and formally at the same time. There's a popular music school that I'm not supposed to talk about because it's not my institution, but it's called Drum Tech in London, and it's not as good as my institution, but it started at the same time. And the tutors there teach lessons formally, and then will upload the lessons to YouTube, so students can watch them later. So it's kind of this hybridized informal, formal, this. And then there's some of this, formalizing the informal, which we do brilliantly at my institution, and others like it, where you've taken popular music and taken it into the institution and then formalised it completely and teaching everybody exactly what to do. Which is okay, but it seems to be kind of missing the point a bit. Well, not missing the point, but it was hard for me to talk about in these terms, in terms of formal and informal. Hence the enculturation idea that I really like, because it tends to cover a lot of things. No, we won't talk about all that. Okay, non-formal learning, things like rock camps, which I love doing. So when it's neither formal nor informal, kind of in the middle of the continuum that Folks Ed talks about. This, I think, is really important, that the notion that authority plays a part in pedagogy. More than that, I think authority plays a part in all learning realization. It's not just pedagogy, not just teaching, but any learning that goes on, you have to believe in, you have to ascribe authority to that from which you are learning, or from whom we are learning. My drum teacher, Pete Fairclough, he brought out an album called Permission in 1997, which didn't sell nearly as well as it should have done, but anyway. He kept asking me this, and this was kind of his guiding philosophy in some ways. Whose permission do you need to play, to think, to do whatever you're going to do? Do you need my permission as the teacher? Do you need your permission as the student? Do you need your peers' permission? Why are you not doing this? Why are you doing it? By whose authority? So, what came out of my data with the drummers, which I will present some of in a moment, was the idea that we each need our own culturally informed permission. So we learn, I can only do certain things on the drums because other people have given me drumming stimuli, things that will work with it, that it comes from. We need our own culturally informed permission to believe in the teachings of anyone. So I ascribed authority to my drum teacher Pete because he was brilliant. I didn't have to, but I did. And to trust ourselves. I think this is important as well. Where are we? This idea of whose permission do you need? I left 3 years with Pete believing that I had every right to trust my own judgments about music, which is very kind of him. Here's a joke for you. Does anyone know this one? No. Do you know who Steve Gadd is? Insert name of famous drummer. Yeah. Drummers can talk about drummers a lot. It's something we do a lot. Guitarists are very similar to guitarists. This should be probably 25 here. But, in my research, I came up with this idea of the drummer's web, about drummers being kind of interconnected. Hildegard had much better ideas about this the other night. She talked about the informal networks and communities of practice and things. None of these seem quite to define what I see. I think as soon as you put something in a box, nothing really fits quite, does it? Well, not nothing, but you know what I mean. It's very difficult to put things into boxes. So the web seemed for me to describe how drummers are connected through time and history and space. And although there's only ever one drummer in a band, they know about other drummers, and they're all are reference points to cultural beings. Is a drummer a cultural being? Okay, he is now. She. Ubuntu was a word I came across as well, which I like. It seems to mean all kinds of different things, but today I'm taking it to mean that we are kind of who we are because of other people, culturally, and I stand by that. So, here are some examples of active learning realization from my drumming population. There was a lady called Ronnie, who was a drummer who she was in the band of the Royal Air Force, and she taught herself to play. That was her active learning realization. She joined the band, had to play drums, so go and figure it out. Anyone who goes to college to learn anything, that's active learning realization. You're going to go to school, you want to learn, presumably. If you're taking lessons anywhere, you're actively realizing the learning. And also, really important for the drummers, back to this web thing and the Steve Gadd joke, is how drummers are constantly wanting to find out about other drummers. Guitarists won't learn about guitarists. We listen to CDs, we watch videos, we're constantly trying to find out about each other all the time. So that's active learning realization, and I think it's important to notice and to consider. It's all part of informal learning, isn't it? But I think there's so much that goes on. It wasn't helpful for me to think in those terms, so I just put it all under this. Active identity realization. Here's some examples. I interviewed a few drummers sort of in situ. I was a guy who was working in the West End in London. I interviewed him in his theatre pit, and then watched him play and interviewed him some more. So he was realizing his identity, while I was realizing my learning about his identity. Brilliant. And I interviewed lots of the teenage drummers while they were at college, so they were realizing their learning actively and also their identities as drummers by talking to me and by being drummers in the place. Like I said, this seems to be very obvious, what I'm saying, but hopefully, like Wenger, will find it very helpful, or at least slightly. So that all the drummers I interviewed were definitely drummers and had made it clear to me they were drummers, so they realised their identity to me. Next, passive learning realisation. What do we have? Here's a good quote for you from a drummer called Matt, who was describing exactly what it was like learning at drum tech. He said, "It's really, really anal, really analytical, which is awesome. No, it's really good, but it gets pretty full on, like, I'm thinking about everything. It's down to where you're like robots. You go over everything in such detail." And nobody taught him that. He hadn't gone there to learn this, but he had learned that that is how it is. And I think it's important to pick up on this stuff. Luke, another one of the guys I interviewed, he said, "The bassist I'm working with at the moment, Loz, we formed a relationship where I can anticipate what he's doing, he can anticipate what I'm doing, and it's a really mental connection. It's amazing." And again, he didn't go there to figure that out, but it's something he's sort of, what I call passive learning realization, something he's found out. It's really helpful. Natalie said, "Rock is generally played by white guys, and then gospel is generally played by black guys." So, again, just when you pick this stuff up, it's stuff that's in the culture. Passive identity realization. Alright, there was a drummer called Sean, and what he said was, it's like we had a drum tech. I turned up really late for a sound check one day, so he had to do the sound check for me. And he's a great drummer, he's a brilliant drummer, but he couldn't get the simplest of tunes that we do. And he was playing all the parts exactly right, but it just wasn't right. It's great, because then I found out I've got it and he hasn't. So that was kind of a realization about himself, what I call passive identity realization. And this drummer called Guy, working in the West End, was saying about the conductor, he says, "My job is to follow him, but personally, I feel if I just give in to that and go, oh well, we're slowing down, then my soul's dying. And that's not good enough for me." There we are. So realizing things about oneself. Here's the diagram again, for some reason. Alright, so learning and identity connected in different ways. Alright, Wenger has said this, that learning changes who we are and creates personal histories of becoming. I love that idea. Becoming and learning connected like that. Identity is constructed via a developmental process that involves the actualization of one's, or full use of one's abilities or potential. This is about how identities are constructed, but that sounds an awful lot like education to me as well. The actualization of full use of one's abilities or potential. So, obviously I'm not the only one who thinks identities and learning are connected. We talked about this, didn't we? Well, I did. Learning transforms our identities. These are Wenger's ideas. So, the identity trajectory, or snowball if you prefer, and the transformation or realization requires cultural contexts. That's my premise. So, here are some what? I don't know what they're called, some little things. Short sentences. There's a really good word for that. Anyway, passive identity realization is a moment of discovery, of learning. That's my contention. Active identity realization requires active learning realization. you can't go about being a drummer without learning how to play the drums. You've got to learn stuff in order to be somebody, to be something, to realise an identity. Passive learning realisation, so figuring stuff out, is a byproduct of active learning realisation and active identity realisation. Okay, this one's a bit longer. I'll let you read this one. So it's kind of cyclical. This all made perfect sense when I wrote it down. It's, I think it's true. Back to this. These are all connected up here because I don't think it necessarily starts with any particular thing. They just you start anyway here, and all these things inform and affect one another, and effect one another, I think, too, in the context of culture. I've never used one of these to point to stuff, so I'm going to do it again. It's empowering. So, implications. Bang on time. Okay, we should not ignore cultural context. I'm not suggesting that you are, but don't do it. What are the cultural contexts? And that's probably a sensible question. Is it the institution we're in? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about what students are doing outside of school, and that culture and the culture in school, and not, thinking about both of these. I'm sure there are more than that. But what is the culture to start with? Really, how and what are our students learning? I know we all care about this anyway, but I think the passive learning realisation for me is it's really helped me to look at, just to kind of take a step back or look at other things that might be going on besides what I hope is going on, or expect is going on. Who are they being and becoming? How do they realise this? How do we realise this? Actively, passively? Hey. So my 3 questions that John asked us to come up with. There we are. So this was quite expensive, so I'm going to go with the top one for now, but I could be swayed. Okay. Yeah, I wonder. So I put that to you. Please be nice. And I thought that would be an interesting question as well. I don't know what the punchline would be, but we'll be discussing this all in about 45 minutes. Finally, yes. At the last one of these conferences 2 years ago in Limerick, we had a Limerick competition, and I was so good at it that they had to invent a different category. I won the best Limerick competition, and then because I wrote 8, I also won the new category of the most Limericks written. It's a habit, but anyway. So I've written a small one, well, it's the same size as all Limericks for today. So, okay.